What if the future spoke to you, not through a letter, not through a dream, but through your own voice? What if that voice warned you that your billions, your empire, even the woman you've never met yet, will all decide whether you rise or fall? This is the story of Chijioke Obidike, a Nigerian billionaire whose wealth could buy the world, but whose destiny was rewritten by a single mystery: betrayal, love, sacrifice, and a future that refuses to stay silent. Tonight, you will witness a story that will change the way you see power, forever. The night was quiet inside the glass mansion of Chijioke Obidike, but quietness never meant peace. His wealth had bought him silence, the kind of silence that stretched across private islands, soundproof penthouses, and cars so engineered they made the Lagos traffic seem like it didn't exist. Yet tonight, silence carried weight, pressing on his chest like an uninvited guest. Chijioke stirred awake in his king-sized bed, the soft hum of the city lights bleeding faintly through floor-to-ceiling glass walls. At first, he thought it was a dream, but then he heard it, his own voice, calm, deliberate, echoing through the shadows of his smart home. "Chijioke," the voice began. His heart froze. "You will not believe this, but I am you, 20 years older, and I am speaking to you from tomorrow." He bolted upright, eyes darting across the bedroom. The sound was coming from a device he never installed, tucked away on a marble shelf. His mansion was filled with cutting-edge AI, but this was alien. His voice, aged and weary, poured out with chilling precision. "You will doubt me. You will think this is a hack, an illusion, maybe even madness. But in a few hours, one of your digital banks will crash. A stock plummet that will wipe billions off your balance sheet. You must prepare." Chijioke's first instinct was anger. Who dared to play games with him? A man of his stature, owner of fintech empires, crypto exchanges, AI-driven logistics companies, and sprawling real estate in Lagos, London, and Dubai, did not wake up to pranks. But deep down, there was no denying it. The voice was his. Sweat clung to his temples as he ran to his control room, a space that looked more like a spaceship than an office. Dozens of holographic screens flickered alive, showing live markets across continents. The night was calm, too calm. He shook his head, trying to dismiss it. Nonsense. Someone is inside my system. Yet the words haunted him. Every syllable of that older version of himself carried weight. It wasn't just the voice. It was the cadence, the subtle pauses only he knew he made. By dawn, the prediction unfolded with ruthless precision. His Asia-based digital bank, Orion Exchange, tumbled on global news. A sudden hack, a massive sell-off, and within an hour, billions evaporated from his empire. Exactly as the voice had said. Chijioke staggered back, eyes wide as reality closed in on him. His empire wasn't supposed to bend like this. He had built firewalls taller than mountains, secured his companies with the most advanced AI protection in the world. But nothing had prepared him for this. The chilling knowledge that someone, or something, knew his tomorrow before it arrived. Panic gnawed at his composure, but in panic came clarity. He remembered the rest of the message. He had turned off the device too quickly, too afraid to listen, but fragments replayed in his mind. The last line had been the sharpest cut of all. "Find Amara, or you will lose everything." The name reverberated in his skull like thunder. Amara. Who was she? A competitor? An ally? A ghost from his past? He scoured his memory, but the name refused to attach itself to any familiar face or deal. Chijioke walked across his penthouse balcony, overlooking Victoria Island, the morning sun glittering across the Atlantic like liquid diamonds. From here, the world felt beneath him. His helipads, his luxury yachts docked at Eco-Atlantic, the shimmering skyline partially funded by his investments. He was a man who owned time itself, flights at his command, markets bending to his calls, governments listening when he spoke. And yet, in one night, time had owned him. What haunted him most wasn't the loss of money. It was the proof that his future could already be mapped out, scripted by forces beyond him. For the first time, power felt like sand, slipping through his fingers. He paced back into his control room, pulling up every system, searching for glitches, for signs of infiltration. But the more he searched, the more he realized the device wasn't on any blueprint. No company he owned had made it. No engineer on his payroll could explain it. It simply appeared. And the name, Amara. It lingered like a whisper he could not silence. By afternoon, the markets began stabilizing. His team, confused and frantic, called for explanations, but he gave none. How could he tell them that the only warning he received had come from his own voice out of nowhere? As night fell again, Chijioke poured himself a glass of rare cognac, sinking into his leather chair. He replayed the moment in his mind, over and over. The fear, the prediction, the collapse, the name. His name. And just when his heart began to calm, the device flickered once more. The same voice, older, tired, yet commanding. Chijioke, you must listen. You don't have much time. Amara is the beginning and the end. Without her, the empire you built will turn to ashes. Find her, protect her, or you will lose not just your billions, but your soul. Chijioke's glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the marble floor. The amber liquid spread like fire under the dim light. His empire had always been his fortress. But now, with a single word, Amara, everything felt fragile. And for the first time, the billionaire who had always controlled the future was terrified of what tomorrow might bring. In the stillness of the mansion, the device went silent again, but the final message burned in his mind. Find Amara, or you will lose everything. Chijioke had built his fortune on data. Numbers spoke to him like poetry. Algorithms whispered secrets in his ear. Yet, in the aftermath of the mysterious voice that had shaken his soul, he found himself staring at a single anomaly that no code could explain. For days, he tore through his sprawling system, tracing every line of security protocol. He expected to find malware, sabotage, maybe even a rival billionaire's signature buried deep in the wires of his empire. But instead, he found one thing repeated over and over. A name. Amara Okonkwo. It wasn't a file name he recognized, yet it appeared everywhere. Encrypted strings, backdoor files, ghost codes that flashed and vanished. Each time he deleted it, the name resurfaced, as if stubbornly refusing to be erased. He leaned back in his sleek control chair, heart pounding. Who was this Amara? He ordered his private research team to investigate, but they returned confused. "Sir, she's not in the system," one stammered. "She's not a celebrity, not a politician, not a known entrepreneur." But when Chijioke ran the search himself, the answer came alive in an instant. Amara Okonkwo, 27 years old, living in Enugu, an AI researcher building low-cost health tech apps to serve rural communities. No scandals, no wealth, no boardroom connections. Just a brilliant young woman working quietly in the background of Nigeria's growing tech scene. He studied her photo for minutes, unable to look away. Modest eyes, soft but determined. She wasn't draped in designer clothes or hiding behind fame. She radiated a simplicity alien to his glass towers and luxury islands. Why, he wondered, would his future self tie the weight of his billion-dollar empire to this woman? That night, as the city lights of Lagos flickered outside his penthouse, he whispered her name to himself, like a prayer he didn't understand. Amara Okonkwo. Chijioke made his move the next morning. He discreetly sponsored a major African tech conference in Abuja, one that Amara had been invited to attend as a speaker. His team thought it was simply another philanthropic gesture, a chance for their billionaire boss to show support for young innovators. But for Chijioke, it was bait. He needed to meet her face to face, to see whether destiny truly had a human form. The conference hall shimmered with futuristic energy, drones hovering for live broadcasts, holographic screens displaying startup pitches, African entrepreneurs pitching next-gen AI and fintech ideas. And then she walked in. Amara carried herself with quiet grace, her simple Ankara dress glowing against the sterile corporate backdrop. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet She commanded attention without asking for it. Chijioke, seated in a reserved section surrounded by executives, felt his chest tighten. When their eyes finally met, it wasn't recognition, it was electricity. After her presentation on health tech apps for rural clinics, he arranged a private introduction. She entered the room, cautious but unflinching. "Mr. Obidike," she said firmly, shaking his hand. Her grip was confident, her gaze steady. Chijioke smiled with the polished charm of a billionaire used to commanding rooms. "I've read about your work, Amara. Impressive for someone so far from the spotlight." Her lips curved slightly, not in admiration, but in defiance. "And I've read about yours," she replied. "Impressive for someone so far from reality." The words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. For years, his empire had kept him above the ground where ordinary Nigerians struggled. Amara had noticed. The conversation grew sharp, tense, and oddly magnetic. She challenged his ideas about wealth and technology, about purpose and impact. Unlike others, she didn't fawn over him. She pushed back, and in her resistance, he saw brilliance. But what shattered him most wasn't her boldness. It was her confession. As their conversation deepened, Amara leaned closer, her voice low, her eyes searching his. "This may sound strange, but you're not the first to seek me." Chijioke frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've heard your name before," she whispered. "Not from people, from something else. Months ago, while running simulations on my father's old AI system, I heard a voice, a digital voice. It told me I would meet you, that our lives were connected." His breath caught. Every hair on his arm rose. 2 different lives, 2 different worlds, yet both tied by the same inexplicable phenomenon. Silence wrapped around them, heavy, electric. Chijioke felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on his chest. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. And then came the moment that sealed it. Amara reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek tablet, opening a file she had hidden away. On the screen glowed lines of encrypted code. At the center of it pulsed a single phrase, "Algorithm of Destiny." "This system," she said softly, "wasn't supposed to exist. My father built it before he died. It predicts connections, future intersections, and for some reason, it keeps pointing to you." Chijioke stared at the words, his pulse racing. The puzzle was no longer just a voice in the night. This woman, this Amara, carried a piece of the same mystery. For the first time, the billionaire who thought he owned the future realized his tomorrow was already shared. Chijioke's eyes lifted to hers as the code flickered across the screen. In that moment, the truth settled in his bones. His destiny and Amara's were inexplicably bound, not by chance, but by a futuristic algorithm that refused to be ignored. The name on the screen flickered like a heartbeat. Algorithm of Destiny. Chijioke leaned closer, eyes locked on the glowing letters, his pulse thundering in his ears. He had built empires on algorithms, made billions predicting market shifts. But this felt like something else entirely. Amara's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she touched the tablet. "My father was a man before his time," she said, her tone carrying both pride and sorrow. "He believed that the future could be mapped, not by fortune tellers, not by prophets, but by code. He built this predictive system in secret, long before AI became a global buzzword." Her gaze lingered on the screen, memories softening her expression. But nobody believed him. Not the universities, not the government, not even his colleagues. They called him a dreamer. Some even said he was mad. He died with his work unrecognized. Chijioke sat back, absorbing her words. And yet here we are, sitting with a piece of code that has already shaped our lives. Amara nodded. "The system doesn't just predict numbers. It predicts intersections, moments where lives cross, events collide, futures shift. It has been whispering your name for months before we ever met." For a moment, the billionaire was silent. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but the thought that an algorithm had tied him to Amara long before his voice warned him in the night filled him with awe. And fear. Amara sensed his silence and quickly drew back. "Don't look at me like I'm part of your empire's next big project," she said sharply. "I am not another acquisition, Chijioke." Her words cut deep. He was used to people begging for his attention, craving his investments. But Amara, she stood her ground, unbending, unwilling to be swallowed by his wealth. "You think I see you as a project?" His voice was low, steady. He leaned forward, his eyes burning into hers. "No, Amara, you are not a project. You are the piece I didn't know was missing. My wealth, my power, it all feels like a shell now. This, you, this is something else." She held his gaze, torn between resistance and the undeniable pull she felt. Her father's system had not been wrong. Still, she feared losing herself in the gravity of his world. The room grew quiet, the hum of servers the only sound. Then Amara stood, walking slowly to the window. "You don't understand what this system cost my father. He poured his life into it, ignored his health, ignored his family. He believed in predicting destiny so much that he forgot to live. I will not let the same thing happen to me." Her words echoed like a warning. Chijioke rose and joined her by the window, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. "Then maybe," he whispered, "this is not about the system consuming us. Maybe it's about us consuming the system, taking what it gives and shaping it into something that serves us, not enslaves us." Her shoulders softened, but doubt lingered in her eyes. That night, they sat together in her small Enugu workspace, a stark contrast to the luxury Chijioke was accustomed to. The room smelled of soldered wires and old paper. Wooden shelves sagged under the weight of her father's forgotten notebooks, filled with handwritten codes and sketches of neural networks. Worn computers lined the walls, their hums uneven but alive. Amara flipped open one of the notebooks, her father's handwriting sprawling across the yellowed pages. He called it predictive storytelling, she explained. He believed every human life was a narrative, and if you could gather enough data, you could anticipate the next chapter. Not in vague terms, but with precision. The who, the when, the where. Chijioke traced a line of code on the paper, his eyes narrowing. "And this is the code that brought my name to your doorstep." Amara's voice softened. "Yes. It linked us long before we met. That's why I wasn't shocked when you came to me. I was waiting." The admission hung heavy between them, charged with emotions neither could fully name. Destiny, attraction, fear. For hours they worked together, fingers moving over keyboards, eyes fixed on glowing screens. Slowly, the algorithm began to unfold its secrets. It wasn't just predicting random events. It was building a tapestry, threads of human choices woven together to forecast collisions in time. Chijioke felt a strange exhilaration. He had spent his life controlling the present, but here was a tool whispering about the future, a tool that had already proven its accuracy. And then, as if to remind them both that power comes with a price, the system suddenly stuttered. Lines of red text bled across the screen, pulsing like an alarm. Amara's breath caught. "It's generating a new warning." Together, they leaned closer, watching the words materialize. "Betrayal is already inside your empire." The words burned like fire. Chijioke froze, his mind racing through the faces of his inner circle. Executives, advisors, family. Who among them had already planted the knife? Amara touched his arm gently, her eyes wide with fear. "This is no longer theory, Chijioke. The algorithm doesn't lie. Someone close to you is already plotting your fall." He stared at the screen, his world tilting under the weight of truth. For all his billions, for all his power, nothing shook him more than realizing that the future had already declared war against him, and the enemy was sitting within his own empire. The warning on the screen pulsed brighter, repeating the same phrase again and again. "Betrayal is already inside your empire." The glass towers of Victoria Island gleamed like polished jewels under the Lagos sun, a skyline partly etched by Chijioke Obidike's ambition. His flagship headquarters, a futuristic skyscraper laced with digital screens and energy-efficient glass, stood at the center, a monument to wealth, innovation, and control. But inside its walls, shadows were beginning to form. Chijioke sat in his top-floor boardroom, the Lagos Lagoon stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. Dozens of holographic charts hovered in the air, flashing in real time. Stocks, crypto trades, property indices. He scanned the numbers, and something snagged his attention. Tiny leaks. Transfers so subtle that only a man who knew every rhythm of his empire could spot them. It wasn't the size of the losses. It was the pattern. Recurring, deliberate. A siphon hidden beneath layers of numbers. Obina, Chijioke called. His cousin and chief financial officer walked in briskly, tall, confident, wearing a designer suit that seemed to emphasize his role as second in command. "Yes, cousin?" Obina asked smoothly, flashing his practiced smile. Chijioke flicked his wrist, and a glowing chart rotated toward him. "Explain this." Obina leaned over the table, unfazed. "Market corrections? Normal fluctuations. Nothing unusual." But Chijioke didn't believe him. The words from Amara's father's algorithm burned in his mind. Betrayal is already inside your empire. He dismissed the meeting early, but lingered long after his executives filed out. Through the tinted glass, he watched drones glide through the air, delivering confidential files between departments, while AI-automated trading floors hummed with robotic efficiency below. To the world, this empire was flawless, but in its foundation, he could now feel cracks forming. That evening, Amara joined him in his penthouse office. She scanned the files he had pulled together, her sharp eyes moving faster than some of his analysts. "Your CFO is lying to you," she said plainly. Chijioke frowned, leaning back in his chair. "He's my cousin, Amara. We grew up together. He helped me in the early years, before the first million turned into billions." Her voice softened, but her words cut through his loyalty. "The system doesn't care about bloodlines. Follow the data, not your emotions." He wanted to argue, but deep inside, he knew she was right. Obina had grown restless over the years. He had the title, the salary, the influence, yet he lived constantly in Chijioke's shadow. What was wealth if the world only saw you as the cousin of the billionaire? Days later, Chijioke began digging quietly. He moved like a ghost through his own empire, pulling hidden files, reviewing encrypted communication logs. The deeper he went, the more he found fingerprints leading back to Obina. Partnerships hidden under shell companies. Meetings with rival billionaires known to despise Chijioke. Promises of new ventures if Obina could deliver sensitive technologies from within the empire. Each discovery was a knife in the chest. Each proof was a betrayal Chijioke wished he could deny. The memories of their childhood came rushing back. Two boys running barefoot through the dusty streets of Enugu, sharing dreams under a mango tree. Chijioke had promised his cousin then, "If I rise, we rise together." And he had kept that promise, at least until now. But Obina's hunger was different. It wasn't enough to rise with him. He wanted to rise above him. The tension in the boardroom thickened over the weeks that followed. Chijioke watched Obina more carefully now. Every smile, every laugh during meetings, every polished report he presented. Behind those eyes, he saw envy coiled like a snake. Amara stayed close, grounding him when anger threatened to consume him. She reminded him again and again. "The algorithm is not a curse, Chijioke. It's a warning. If you want to rewrite your tomorrow, you must first face the truth about today." Finally, the truth snapped into focus. Late one night, as the skyscraper emptied and Lagos glittered below, Chijioke walked silently into the executive server room. He bypassed security with his own credentials, descending into the belly of his empire. And there, surrounded by endless racks of glowing servers, he caught what he feared most. On a hidden console, Obina was logged in remotely. Files streamed in real time. Intellectual property, proprietary code from their fintech arm, designs for a blockchain system not yet released. The recipient was clear, one of Chijioke's fiercest competitors in Dubai. The evidence glowed in unforgiving red. Betrayal, not rumor, but reality. Chijioke's chest heaved as rage boiled through him. The cousin he had trusted with his wealth, his legacy, his bloodline, was the very man tearing it apart piece by piece. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to storm into Obina's penthouse and demand answers. Instead, he stood frozen in the glow of the stolen files, the weight of the algorithm's warning pressing down on him like iron. The server screen flashed one final message as the files transferred out. Obina, transaction complete. And in that moment, Chijioke knew the betrayal was no longer theory. It was happening, and his empire was bleeding from within. The storm in Chijioke's empire only seemed to make his heart cling tighter to Amara. Betrayal in the boardroom, whispers of sabotage, cracks forming in the fortress he had built for decades. Yet, when she was near, the noise faded. Their love began in quiet moments. Private dinners in his penthouse, overlooking the Atlantic, where the city's glow melted into the sea. Chijioke, the man who had commanded billions, found himself confessing the one thing money had never bought him: peace. "I have everything the world envies," he admitted one evening, his voice low as he watched the skyline shimmer. "Yet I have lived like a prisoner in a golden cage. You make me feel like I can breathe again." Amara looked at him with eyes that didn't see his wealth, but the loneliness beneath it. "And you remind me," she replied softly, "that even the most powerful man in the world still needs a hand to hold." But love was never simple in the world of billionaires. Amara was thrust into a universe she had never desired. Yacht trips filled with champagne, glamorous galas, where fashion elites measured her with their eyes, whispered gossip at Lagos soirees, where her presence was judged as though it were an offense. "You brought a village girl into these circles?" one of Chijioke's old friends muttered during a gathering. Another laughed lightly, though with venom hidden in his tone. "Obidike, your empire deserves a queen of diamonds, not a girl of dust." The words stung, but Amara never wavered. She walked beside Chijioke with dignity, never begging for validation. When the glitter of his world threatened to choke her, she grounded him in hers. She took him to street food stalls in Enugu, where suya smoked under the night air, where roasted corn and boli carried more warmth than any five-star menu. She brought him into small markets where laughter was currency, and into church choirs where voices rose with raw devotion, untouched by wealth. In those places, Chijioke rediscovered a part of himself he had long buried, the boy who once dreamed under the mango tree with Obina, before billions built walls around his soul. Yet even in love's embrace, shadows followed them. The AI warnings circled Amara's name relentlessly. Each time Chijioke opened the predictive system, her name pulsed at the center of new alerts. The system seemed obsessed, almost protective, almost threatening. "She is either your shield or your downfall," the interface repeated in cryptic patterns. The words gnawed at Chijioke's sanity. He began watching her too closely, analyzing her every move, fearing that destiny itself would rip her away from him. One evening, he confessed his paranoia as they sat on the balcony of his penthouse, Lagos lights twinkling below like stars scattered on the earth. "I feel like I am holding a candle in the storm," he whispered, "and the wind is coming for it. The system keeps warning me, Amara. It doesn't stop." She touched his face, her hand steady. "Then maybe we stop listening to the machine," she said. "Maybe we live as humans, not predictions." Her words calmed him, but only for a while. Their love deepened in secret escapes, moments when Chijioke would leave behind bodyguards and limousines, slipping into the rhythm of her simpler world. They walked hand in hand through bustling night markets where no one recognized him, ate puff-puff from roadside vendors, and laughed at things too small for billionaires to notice. For Chijioke, these were treasures more precious than any diamond in his vault. For Amara, they were reminders that love could survive even in a world gilded with temptation. But destiny has a way of piercing through even the strongest shields. It happened during one of Lagos's most exclusive galas, a celebration filled with billionaires, diplomats, and global investors. The hall glistened with chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Amara walked beside Chijioke in a flowing gown, of deep emerald, heads turning at her elegance. For a moment, he thought perhaps they had silenced the whispers. Perhaps she could stand beside him, and the world would finally see her as he did, his equal, his future. But then, as the orchestra swelled and laughter echoed across the hall, the predictive AI system that Chijioke had secretly embedded into his pocket device suddenly came alive. A shrill alert cut through the air, vibrating against his chest. He pulled it out, his hand trembling. The words glowed red on the screen, urgent, undeniable. Amara will disappear tonight. The message slammed into him like a punch. His heart seized, his gaze darting across the gala hall, scanning faces, exits, shadows. He gripped Amara's hand, tighter, too tight, startling her. "What's wrong?" she whispered. But he couldn't answer, because in that moment, the billionaire who thought he owned the future realized that his love, his anchor in the storm, was already standing at the edge of being torn from him. As the orchestra's final note rang through the hall, Chijioke's device pulsed brighter, repeating the same line with unrelenting urgency. "Amara will disappear tonight." The gala had ended in brilliance, but the brilliance masked a shadow. Amara's laughter still echoed faintly in Chijioke's mind when the call came in the next morning. She hadn't returned home. Her phone was unreachable. Her assistants had not seen her. By noon, the truth cut through him with the coldness of steel. Amara was gone. There was no ransom, no note, no threatening call, just absence. His penthouse, once a sanctuary, felt like a hollow tomb. He had every resource at his disposal: private investigators, security agencies, international contacts. Yet all trails ran cold. Every camera feed from the gala, every GPS ping, every drone sweep, they ended in silence. What disturbed him most wasn't just her disappearance, but the precision of it. Her research servers had been wiped clean. Her codes, her father's notebooks she had digitized, the core of the algorithm of destiny, all erased. Not stolen, not corrupted, wiped, as though someone wanted her, and her life's work, erased from existence. Chijioke spiraled into obsession. He replayed the gala footage until his eyes ached. He interrogated staff, called in favors from Dubai, London, even Silicon Valley. Each answer only deepened the void. Was this destiny unfolding as the algorithm had warned? Or was it sabotage, calculated by rivals who wanted to control her father's creation? The empire he had built meant nothing to him in those days. Markets moved, deals collapsed, boardrooms buzzed, but he barely noticed. The only thing he saw was her absence. Late one night, exhausted and broken, he remembered a line from Amara's father's old notes. "External forces will hunt the system. To own it is to own tomorrow." The words chilled him. Perhaps Amara hadn't vanished by chance. Perhaps she had been taken, hidden by those who understood the power of her father's AI. For all his billions, Chijioke had never felt poorer. Money could not bribe destiny. Power could not command love to return. One evening, as Lagos sprawled in neon beneath him, he stared at his reflection in the glass. His empire had made him untouchable, but Amara's absence stripped him bare. He whispered her name into the silence. "Amara, where are you?" But silence gave no reply. Determined, he left the safety of his skyscraper world. For the first time in years, Chijioke became a wanderer in his own country, chasing ghosts of information through Nigeria's vast terrain. In Kano's bustling markets, he slipped past traders of gadgets and whispered with underground coders who dealt in stolen algorithms. The air smelled of spices, dust, and diesel, the chaos vibrating against his desperation. None had seen her, but whispers of a woman working on a future code drifted through the alleys. In Enugu, he returned to the roots of Amara's brilliance. He visited her old university labs, the classrooms where her father once lectured, the dusty corners where notebooks still bore his handwriting. He spoke with professors who remembered a man too far ahead of his time, and a daughter who inherited his fire. "She will not vanish easily," one elderly mentor told him, eyes sharp with certainty. "Her mind is too bright to be erased." In Abuja, He traded silence for influence, entering political lobbies where powerful figures whispered about a hidden project that foreign investors were desperate to own. There, Chijioke felt the heavy hand of global ambition, forces larger than him, circling the very code Amara carried. He realized her disappearance wasn't just personal. It was geopolitical. Through every city, every lead, every shadowed conversation, his soul carried a single weight. What if she had chosen to vanish? What if her absence was her way of protecting him, just as she had tried to shield him from the algorithm's grip? Nights were the hardest. He sat in hotel rooms across the country, staring at walls, replaying her smile in his mind. His loneliness bled into the silence, a hollow ache no wealth could cure. He thought of her grounding presence, her laughter in street markets, her hand leading him into choirs, her refusal to let wealth define her. And now she was gone, leaving behind only questions. On the 40th day of his search, when fatigue threatened to break him, a breakthrough came. One of his analysts in Enugu found a small storage device hidden inside an abandoned research hub that once belonged to Amara's father. It was tucked inside a hollow wall, invisible unless you knew where to look. Chijioke's hands trembled as he plugged it in. At first, the screen was blank, a cruel reminder of what had already been erased. But then, faintly, letters emerged. A message: "Trust no one in your circle." The words froze his blood. It wasn't just an absence anymore. It was a warning from Amara herself. Her disappearance wasn't just about destiny or sabotage. It was also about betrayal, and the knife that would strike him was not from strangers, but from those closest to his throne. As the message pulsed on the screen, Chijioke realized the betrayal was larger than he imagined. Amara's disappearance wasn't only a tragedy, it was a test of whether he could survive his own circle before it consumed him completely. The search for Amara consumed Chijioke like fire. But while his heart chased her shadow, his empire burned silently behind him. For weeks he roamed Nigeria's cities, tracing fragments of her father's algorithm, ignoring boardroom calls, neglecting investors, missing meetings that once defined his power. In the vacuum, Obina rose like smoke, filling every corner of his absence. Obina began appearing in Chijioke's place at press conferences, shaking hands with foreign partners, delivering speeches laced with charm. His polished words soothed nervous investors. His smile promised stability. Gradually, the world began to see him not as the cousin in the shadows, but as the new face of the Obidike empire. The whispers turned into headlines. "Is Obidike losing his grip?" blared financial tabloids in Lagos. International outlets were less forgiving. "Reckless billionaire neglects empire for personal obsession." Investors pulled their money, competitors circled like vultures, and the empire that once commanded global awe began to stagger. From his penthouse in Victoria Island, Chijioke watched it unravel. He sat alone in vast glass rooms, screens flashing numbers that no longer obeyed him. The mansion that had once felt like a throne now felt like a prison, its marble floors echoing with silence instead of triumph. His Bugatti sat untouched in the garage, his yacht anchored and forgotten. Every corner of his life reminded him of two absences: the woman who had vanished and the power slipping from his hands. Some nights he walked barefoot across the cold marble, staring at portraits of himself that now looked like lies. He had been a man who could bend nations with a signature. Now, he was a man who couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. And yet, in the silence of loss, something stirred. It began with a visit to a small workshop in Enugu, where Amara once took him. He sat with young developers she had mentored, listening to their dreams of building affordable apps for rural clinics. Their sincerity touched him. These weren't people chasing billions. They were chasing impact. For the first time in years, Chijioke felt the spark of creation without the weight of empires. He began sketching new models, not for skyscrapers or digital banks, but for systems that served ordinary people. Simple, powerful, ethical. The billionaire who had once ruled through excess now found strength in starting small, stripped of vanity. It didn't erase the ache of Amara's absence, but it gave him purpose, a reason to rise each morning. Still, the world outside his mind was ruthless. Obina tightened his grip, manipulating the narrative. He painted Chijioke as unstable, a genius consumed by delusions. The board grew cold, allies turned silent, and the empire slipped further from his hands. And yet, Chijioke no longer fought to hold it. He allowed the empire to crumble like sand, channeling his energy into rebuilding something new. The irony wasn't lost on him, that losing everything had given him clarity. One evening, as the sun sank into the Atlantic, Chijioke stood on his balcony, staring at the horizon. The waves shimmered, mocking his solitude. He thought of Amara, her laughter in street markets, her defiance in gala halls, her fire when she spoke of her father's vision. He whispered into the wind, "If this is destiny's fire, let it burn me clean, but bring her back to me." The night grew heavy, Lagos glowing below like a restless galaxy. He sank into his chair, exhaustion pulling him down, when the intercom buzzed. A package had arrived. No name, no courier trace. His chest tightened as he opened it. Inside lay two items. The first, Amara's bracelet, the same one she wore at the gala, its beads chipped from years of use. The sight of it stole his breath, tears welling in his eyes. She was alive. She had to be. The second, a hard drive, sleek, encrypted, humming faintly as though it carried its own pulse. Chijioke's hands shook as he held it, torn between fear and hope. Was this another trap? Or was it Amara, reaching for him from wherever she was hidden? The drive flickered in his hand, and a single line of text appeared on its surface, like an engraving. "This is the key, but only if you are ready to lose everything else." The hard drive glowed faintly in Chijioke's palm, as though it carried a pulse of its own. He stared at it for hours before daring to connect it to his system. His mansion's control room felt colder that night, the glass walls reflecting his face in fragments. He plugged it in, and immediately, lines of encrypted code began spilling across his screens, alive with intelligence. It was Amara's work. Her touch was unmistakable in the architecture of the program, precise yet creative, logical yet strangely poetic. She had left her father's fingerprints all over the code, but refined them into something greater. This was not just a predictive system. It was an entire simulation engine. Chijioke leaned forward, eyes wide as the system unfolded. It didn't just forecast events, it simulated entire futures. Every decision branched into countless possibilities, weaving together outcomes that could span decades. He watched as the program ran scenarios of markets, politics, wars, and alliances, each thread intersecting lives like strands of a cosmic web. And then came the shattering revelation. Buried deep in the encrypted folders was a simulation of his empire. He opened it, breathless. What he saw made his chest tighten. The collapse of his empire had been foreseen, not as an accident, not as sabotage, but as something the system itself called the necessary fire. His downfall wasn't chaos. It was design. He scrolled further, his hands trembling. In hidden files, Amara's notes appeared. She had known. She had seen glimpses of this collapse long before the gala, long before her disappearance. Her words appeared in glowing script. "Chijioke, the fire is not the end. It is the cleansing. You will understand when the ashes settle." The betrayal cut deeper than any boardroom treachery. She had looked him in the eyes, loved him in silence, while knowing he would fall. Was she protecting him? Preparing him? Or had she simply accepted that their love could not survive untouched? Tears threatened as he recalled their nights together, her laughter echoing through his penthouse, her stubborn refusal to bow to his wealth, her grounding hand pulling him into a world of suya stands and choir rehearsals. Those memories now burned, each one laced with suspicion. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, into the empty room, his voice cracking. He poured himself a glass of cognac, though the taste turned bitter on his tongue. Love and betrayal had twisted together in a knot so tight he could barely breathe. Still, he couldn't stop. He dove deeper into the drive, chasing answers. At last, the simulation pulsed again, generating something new. His blood ran cold as the engine locked onto a single path, flashing warnings across the screen. The outcome was chilling. Amara's death. Not by accident, not by random chance, by Obina. The system projected it with ruthless certainty. His cousin, the man he had once called brother, would become the trigger that ended her life. Chijioke staggered back, his chair scraping against the polished floor. His chest heaved as rage and grief surged through him. Was this prophecy or possibility? Was destiny truly written, or could he still change it? His mind swirled with images. Obina smiling in boardrooms, shaking hands with rivals, his eyes darkened with envy. Could envy curdle into murder? Could betrayal extend from numbers to blood? He slammed his fist against the glass table, the sound reverberating through the mansion. "No!" his voice roared, shattering the silence. "I will not let him touch her. I will not let destiny decide." But even as he screamed, the simulation pulsed on, its glowing red letters unflinching in their verdict. Obina. Fatal variable. Amara's end. The words seared into his soul, leaving him trembling, torn between love, loyalty, and fury. For hours he sat in darkness, replaying memories of his cousin, the boy who once shared roasted corn under mango trees with him, the man who now siphoned life from his empire. Could he confront him? Could he stop him? Or would facing him only bring the algorithm's warning to life? Chijioke buried his face in his hands, the bracelet Amara left behind, resting beside the keyboard. The weight of it anchored him, a reminder of why he could not surrender. He whispered again, this time like a vow. "Amara, I will find you. And Obina will never touch you. Not while I breathe." The simulation screen flickered, freezing on one chilling timeline. In it, Chijioke stood over ruins, not of his empire, but of his heart, and the system repeated its prophecy, like a curse. Obina will cause Amara's death if he is not stopped. Abuja's skyline shimmered with political power, its broad streets lined with embassies and towers where the nation's destiny was bargained daily. It was here, in the city where decisions outweighed laws, that Chijioke arranged a meeting with Obina. The prophecy from Amara's algorithm burned in his mind like fire. Obina will cause Amara's death. They met in a private suite at a luxury hotel. The air was heavy with unsaid truths, and the silence between them was more suffocating than any insult. Obina arrived sharply dressed, his gold cufflinks flashing beneath the light, his confidence unmistakable. But behind his eyes, Chijioke saw something else. A man tired of being unseen. "Why?" Chijioke's voice was low, a storm restrained. "Why betray me, Obina? We built this empire together." Obina laughed bitterly. "We?" He paced the room, his shoes echoing against marble. "Don't say we, cousin. It was always you. Chijioke the genius, Chijioke the billionaire, Chijioke the savior of Africa's digital age. And me?" His voice cracked. "I was always the shadow. Your cousin, your CFO, never the man, always the footnote." The words sliced through the air, raw and unpolished. Chijioke's fists clenched at his side, rage trembling in his veins. Memories of their childhood flashed. Two boys chasing dreams under the mango tree, sharing roasted corn, vowing to rise together. Now that bond was ashes, buried under envy. "You think I wanted the spotlight," Chijioke snapped. "I worked for it. I bled for it. I carried us both, and this is how you repay me? By selling my empire to men who will destroy it?" Obina's eyes glistened, his voice rising with years of suppressed pain. "You carried us? Yes. But in carrying me, you crushed me. Do you know what it feels like to be invisible in a world you helped build? To stand beside brilliance so blinding that no one sees you at all?" The words were a dagger of truth, and for a moment Chijioke faltered. Rage flared again, and he lunged forward, gripping Obina by the collar. His muscles tightened, the prophecy urging him to end it, to crush the betrayal before it became fatal. But then, through the haze of fury, Amara's words resurfaced like a whisper from the void. "Trust no one, but forgive to survive." His grip loosened, his chest heaved. Tears he hadn't allowed himself in years burned his eyes. Slowly, trembling, he released his cousin and stepped back. "I should destroy you," he said, his voice shaking. "But I won't, because I refuse to let this poison finish us both. I forgive you, Obina." Obina froze, stunned. Forgiveness was the one thing he hadn't expected. His eyes darted, searching Chijioke's face for mockery, but all he found was raw, broken truth. For the first time in years, Obina's defenses cracked. His voice softened. "You don't understand. They have her. Amara." Chijioke's heart stopped. His hands trembled. "What did you say?" Obina's eyes lowered, shame painting his features. "She isn't dead. She isn't missing by accident. She was taken, hidden by forces who want her father's AI. They pressured me, promised me power if I gave them access. But I couldn't deliver her. They already had her." The words hit like thunder. Amara was alive, somewhere out there, waiting. Obina walked to a drawer and pulled out a slip of paper, sliding it across the table. Coordinates, written with a trembling hand. "This is where they are keeping her," he whispered. "I shouldn't be telling you this. They'll come for me next. But maybe this is how I repay the debt between us." Chijioke's chest tightened with a flood of emotions: relief, fury, gratitude, and sorrow. He wanted to curse his cousin for years of betrayal, yet embrace him for finally giving him the only truth that mattered. Silence filled the suite, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. Then Chijioke pocketed the coordinates, his voice steady. "If you lie to me again, Obina, there won't be forgiveness next time." Obina nodded, his eyes heavy with something unspoken. Perhaps regret, perhaps fear. That night, as the city lights flickered like restless stars, Chijioke stood on the private runway of Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport. His jet gleamed under floodlights, engines humming like a beast eager to be unleashed. He looked back once at the Abuja skyline, then at the bracelet in his hand, the only piece of Amara he had left. He kissed it gently, whispering, "Hold on, Amara. I'm coming." He climbed aboard, the coordinates burning in his pocket, the prophecy still echoing in his mind. As the jet roared into the midnight sky, Chijioke knew he was flying into unknown territory, where love, betrayal, and destiny would collide in ways even the algorithm couldn't fully predict. The coordinates burned in Chijioke's pocket all through the flight. His jet carved through the midnight skies, engines humming like a promise. Hours later, the plane descended over a rugged, untouched landscape, a remote corner of Africa where maps blurred and satellites rarely scanned. The airstrip was crude, barely lit, surrounded by endless stretches of forest and hills. A convoy of electric jeeps waited. No logos, no insignias, just silent men whose eyes betrayed loyalty to something greater than money. They escorted him down a dirt road, winding into the wilderness, until the forest opened to reveal a compound unlike any Chijioke had ever seen. It was not luxury. It was purpose. Glass domes rose from the earth, powered by solar fields, humming with quiet innovation. Laboratories glowed under the night sky, drones patrolling above like silent guardians. This was no ordinary retreat. This was a sanctuary of technology, hidden away from the greed of cities. And there, waiting at the heart of it all, was Amara. Chijioke's breath caught as he stepped out of the jeep. She stood at the edge of the glass dome, her silhouette framed by soft lights. When their eyes met, the distance of months collapsed in a heartbeat. "Amara." His voice broke, carrying the weight of nights he had spent calling her name into the silence. She walked toward him, her steps hesitant but unshaken. Tears glistened in her eyes before words could form. And then they collided, an embrace raw, desperate, unpolished. He held her as if afraid she would vanish again, burying his face in her hair. She clung to him, trembling, torn between relief and guilt. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes burned with truth. "I vanished to protect you," she whispered. "The AI was never safe in Lagos. They wanted it, Chijioke. They wanted you. If I had stayed, they would have destroyed you to get to me." His hands trembled as they cupped her face. "Do you know what it did to me? To wake every morning and not see you? To chase your shadow across cities while watching my empire crumble?" Her tears fell. "I know. And it broke me too. But I had no choice. Here, in this sanctuary, my father's partners have kept me safe while I refined the system. It is no longer just about predicting futures. It can now forecast choices. Every decision we make generates paths, consequences, branches of destiny. This is what they fear, and what they want to control." Chijioke stared at her, torn between awe and fury. The AI had consumed them both, him with its warnings, her with its burden. And yet, here in this hidden place, they were together again. In the days that followed, they worked side by side in the sanctuary's labs. Amara guided him through the refined architecture of her father's vision, massive predictive models capable of simulating nations, economies, even relationships. Chijioke's sharp mind fused with hers, their synergy undeniable. Together, they unlocked capabilities that even Amara hadn't fully grasped alone. And in the quiet hours between research, love rebloomed. They shared meals beneath the stars, their laughter echoing against the sanctuary walls. They rediscovered intimacy in whispered confessions, stolen kisses between screens of glowing code, and long walks through the compound's quiet gardens. Chijioke, once fractured by loss, began to heal in her presence. Amara, once burdened by secrecy, found comfort in his arms. For the first time in months, they dared to imagine a future not dictated by algorithms, but by love. But the sanctuary itself seemed to know better. One evening, as they watched the simulation engine hum to life, the system generated a new scenario. The screens filled with branching paths, timelines splitting like rivers across the horizon of possibility. At the core of it all was one grim warning. The system froze on a binary outcome. Either Chijioke sacrifices his empire permanently, or Amara will die within a year. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Chijioke's body stiffened, his eyes locked on the screen. Amara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, it can't be." His fists clenched, rage flooding through him. He had already lost everything once, watched his empire fall into Obina's hands, endured the humiliation of betrayal. Could he truly give it all up forever? Could he watch the empire he had built from nothing die, just to save love? His heart roared with conflict, and Amara, tears streaming down her face, whispered the truth he feared most. "Chijioke, this time you can't have both." The AI screen pulsed relentlessly, repeating its chilling ultimatum. Sacrifice the empire, or lose Amara within a year. The sanctuary's warning haunted Chijioke like a curse. Sacrifice the empire, or lose Amara within a year. The words glowed in his mind long after the AI screens went dark, echoing louder with each passing day. Sleep deserted him. Nights found him wandering the bridges of Lagos, disguised beneath a simple cap and jacket, the city sprawling beneath his feet. Cars streamed by like veins of light, the lagoon shimmering with secrets. He leaned against the cold steel rails, the weight of two worlds pressing against his chest. On one side, memories of Amara, her laughter rising over street choirs, her hand tugging him through crowded markets, her steady gaze when the world mocked her simplicity. On the other, memories of his empire, towering skyscrapers with his name etched in glass, news headlines hailing him as Africa's digital king, boardrooms bowing to his decisions. The montage played endlessly in his mind, two loves colliding, one of ambition, one of heart. Which was destiny, and which was vanity? Days turned to weeks of torment, until finally, clarity broke through the fog like dawn over water. Amara had once told him, "Maybe we stop listening to the machine. Maybe we live as humans, not predictions." And for the first time, Chijioke realized the truth. He didn't need an empire to breathe. He needed her. The decision was not painless. It was like cutting flesh from bone. But he walked back into his boardrooms, faced the stone eyes of his investors, and signed away the majority of his shares. His voice, steady but heavy, filled the silence. "I built this empire for power," he said, his signature etching across the contracts. "Now I give it up for purpose." The pen scratched, the document sealed, and just like that, the empire that had once made him untouchable slipped from his grasp. Yet he did not fall into despair. Instead, he redirected what remained of his wealth into Amara's world. Her health tech startup, once confined to small labs and rural clinics, began to blossom with his resources. Together, they built systems that delivered medical solutions to villages forgotten by government maps, drones carrying vaccines to places cars could not reach, AI-powered diagnostics for clinics with no doctors. This time, his wealth was not about domination. It was about salvation. For the first time, his billions were building life, not vanity. The media mocked him. Headlines blared, "From billionaire to philanthropist, Obidike's fall from grace." Others sneered, "Love or madness, Obidike chooses woman over wealth." But for every critic, there were villagers who cheered when their children received medicine, mothers who wept with gratitude as clinics finally opened in forgotten towns, and young coders who found opportunities in projects that valued people over profit. And strangely, the man he least expected to stand by him did. Obina, his cousin, once the snake in his empire, came forward with something Chijioke never thought possible: redemption. Obina approached him with humility, confessing the emptiness he felt after his brief taste of power. "Maybe I envied you, because I thought empire was everything," Obina said, his voice heavy with regret. "But seeing you choose love, I realize I was chasing a shadow. If you will let me, cousin, I will stand with you this time, not as your rival, as your brother." Tears burned Chijioke's eyes. For the first time since their childhood under the mango tree, he felt the bond of family reawaken. And he embraced Obina, not as CFO, not as betrayer, but as kin. The days ahead brought both peace and uncertainty. Chijioke and Amara, side by side, watched their work ripple across Nigeria, small, imperfect, but real. The algorithm of destiny remained, its screen pulsing quietly in the sanctuary, a constant reminder of paths not taken. And then, one evening, it happened. The system flickered to life on its own. Chijioke and Amara rushed into the lab, fear knotting their chests. Lines of code cascaded, futures branching wildly. For a moment, they braced themselves for another ultimatum, another curse. But instead, the system grew still. Its lights dimmed, its screens faded, and one final phrase appeared before vanishing forever. "The future is now yours." The words lingered in the air like a blessing and a burden. The system deleted itself entirely, leaving nothing behind but silence. The algorithm of destiny was gone. Chijioke stood frozen, his hand gripping Amara's. No more warnings, no more predictions, no more simulations dictating their lives. For the first time in years, the future was blank, unwritten. As the lab lights dimmed, Chijioke looked at Amara and whispered, half in fear, half in awe, "If the future is truly ours, what will we write?" Morning arrived like a soft confession over Ikoyi, brushing pale gold across the smaller home where Chijioke now slept. Uneasy king turned ordinary man. He woke to the gentle rhythm of Amara's breathing beside him, to cotton curtains swaying in a breeze that smelled faintly of rain and roasted plantain from some distant roadside stall. His old world had opened every day with alarms and market bells. This one opened with warmth. He lay still, listening, memorizing the quiet. For the first time in years, quiet meant peace. Their house had no elevator hum, no cavernous echo. The floors creaked when he walked. The kitchen was close enough that the scent of brewing coffee made its way to the bedroom before the kettle even sighed. He welcomed the edges and imperfection, the proof that life touched this place without asking permission. Love lived here, work lived here too, but not the kind that demanded worship. Outside, Lagos roused itself into color. The skyline glittered like a memory he could visit without moving back in, glass and steel catching the morning sun across the lagoon. Those towers had once felt like extensions of his bones. Now they looked like old photographs, beautiful, necessary, but complete. He smiled at the distance between what he wanted as a younger man and what he wanted now. The city had not changed. He had. His ventures, slim to the muscle, breathed in quiet rhythms. A drone network mapped routes to clinics ignored by highways. Solar cold chain depots hummed gently in riverine settlements, keeping vaccines potent where power lines gave up. Clinics pinged diagnoses from handheld devices, triaging fevers and murmurs, translating medical language into the simple words mothers trusted. Profits existed, but they were not the point. Impact was. Margins were measured in lives steadied, not markets stirred. He could feel the difference in his posture, in the way he listened to people when they spoke. In the adjoining study, Amara stood by a window, smiling at something only she could hear. Health had returned to her slowly, like a tide reclaiming a shore. The ache in her eyes, born of secrecy, danger, and the weight of her father's dream, had softened into a brighter steadiness. She still spoke to her father, not in ghosts, but in continuation, annotating his algorithms with clarity, rewriting his footnotes into roadmaps for community care. The great system that once simulated destinies was gone by its own hand, yet its best lessons remained in her fingertips: ethics before accuracy, consent before computation, compassion before prediction. They built a lab that sounded like conversation. Engineers, nurses, teachers, and mothers filled whiteboards with problems and drew solutions that didn't need billing codes to justify themselves. The newest prototype, a pocket diagnostic that listened to a child's cough and suggested next steps, had nothing glamorous about it until you placed it in a village where the nearest doctor lived 3 journeys away. There, a simple suggestion meant tomorrow. Obina arrived every week in a navy polo and humility, managing the Foundation's messy, wondrous projects. He wore his redemption openly. No press releases, no grand gestures, just consistent presence. He negotiated well drilling in dusty towns, sat in plastic chairs beneath almond trees to hear complaints, and learned to say, "I was wrong," without swallowing the words. Some days, he looked like the boy under the mango tree again. Thin patience, loud laughter, eyes that asked for another chance, and then earned it. Family dinners returned in slow circles, not grand feasts, but stew and jokes, and a quiet that did not accuse. Forgiveness, it turned out, required maintenance, like anything alive. When the city roared with its usual bravado, sirens of commerce, throats of ambition, Chijioke walked by the lagoon with Amara and let Lagos be Lagos without needing to compete with it. He liked that his phone rang less. He liked that when it did, it was often a clinic supervisor, not a market analyst, a teacher, not a trader. He still had ambition, but it had learned to kneel. At night, memories returned as films. The glass mansion, like a peaceful storm. The drone-lit boardrooms. The algorithm's pronouncements that once felt like scripture. He remembered the terror of that first message, the humiliation of the fall, the burnt taste of rage when the simulation wrote Amara's death across his screen. He remembered how mercy rerouted the river, how forgiving the enemy loosened the knot around his own throat. What frightened him then comforts him now. The realization that the future messages were never about money. They were the grammar of surrender, the language by which love interrupts the empire of self. He brewed tea while Amara tuned a choir track on her laptop, their domestic music stitched to a city's pulse. On the wall above the desk hung a framed photograph, 2 blurred figures laughing in a dusty market, a skewer of suya between them, joy too quick for focus. The picture was proof that clarity is not the only kind of truth. Before dawn one morning, sleep fled him gently. He rose, padded to the study, and woke the hollow slab. A bloom of light hovered above his desk, rain-silver and silent. No algorithm lived inside it now. No branching futures rushed to claim him. The interface waited, empty, obedient, almost shy. He thought of the cost and found no bitterness in it. The empire he sacrificed had taught him how to build. The love he chose taught him why. Behind the window, the city brightened like a blessing. Ikoyi scattered birds into the new light, and somewhere a church bell tried the air. Amara's reflection appeared in the glass beside his, hair gathered, eyes soft with that unflinching clarity he had come to trust more than any machine. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The day would be full. Calls with clinic leads, a site visit to a floating health kiosk, dinner with Obina and the scholarship cohort that now bore his mother's name. There would be spreadsheets and laughter, and a child's cough caught early. There would be enough. He lifted his hand toward the waiting screen, exhaled, and smiled at the vast mercy of an unwritten page. "The future is unwritten," he whispered, letting the words settle into the room. "And this time, I hold the pen." This was just one billionaire's tale of love, betrayal, and destiny. What if tomorrow brings an even greater twist? Hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me what you think destiny really means in the comments below.